Hello, everyone, and thank you all for showing up wherever you are. I appreciate you coming for this talk. It's a real pleasure to be part of this conference and speaking in this panel with these two amazing, incredible scientists. My goal today is to show that our planet is formed by an interconnected web of life, and that by untangling or simplifying the relationships between species with the help of data science, we can help pave the way towards a more sustainable future. So pollination refers to the reproduction of flowering plants, leading to the formation of seeds and fruits. It involves the transfer of pollen grains from the male part of the flower to the female part of the flower. But being unable to move makes the whole job rather tricky, rather difficult for plants, which is why they rely on animals to perform this crucial role and carry the pollen and carry on their reproduction. There's an enormous diversity of interactions between plants and their flowering animals, and it's estimated that between 75 and 95% of all plants that produce flowers rely on pollinators. And insects are the most important pollinators, but these key interactions and many others, if not all, are endangered. We are currently undergoing a sixth mass extinction event, and increasing evidence suggests that insects are collapsing even quicker than we can describe them. Among all existing insects, bees are some of the most important pollinators, and they follow this sad trend. For example, the rusty-patched bumblebee has seen its range shrink by 90% in the last 20 years. And declines in wild bees have been documented in all regions in the world. And as usual, the data from the global south is notably lacking. We don't even know which species are there, so we don't even know their population trends. For comparison, we have a very good idea about the population trends for both mammals and birds, of which 91% and 100% of all existing species have been assessed, as you can see here in the green bars in your screen. But the conservation status of the overwhelming majority of the 20,000 bee species is a mystery, given that less than 1% have been evaluated. And the collapse of biodiversity cannot be attributed to any single cause. Instead, populations are confronting multiple simultaneous threats. And here I highlight the most important ones for bees and other insects, which are habitat destruction and landscape modification, climate change, and the widespread use of pesticides. And why does this matter? Why do we care? Well, about 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat need pollinators, or else we wouldn't be on our plates. Bees also represent an essential food resources for other animals, such as those gorgeous bee eaters found in Kenya, and they play a vital role in sustaining plant populations, including aesthetically significant landscapes, such as the symbolic poppy, California poppies. And how do we know all this? Well, you go out to the field or the lab and you do experiments and collect data. We need robust, high-quality data in order to be able to make inferences about the nature around us and understand the underlying processes that create beautiful, diverse ecosystems that we all love and depend upon. And the cool thing about working with bees is that they're only like really nice weather. It cannot be too cold or too windy or too hot, and definitely not raining. So bees are entirely reliant on flowering plants for their survival and for their whole life cycle. So they make a great study system, not only for understanding pollination, but also for understanding other types of interactions more globally, more generally. So what we do is we go out into the field, we identify the plant species, and then we look for bees and other flower visitors. Once we see an animal landing on the flower, we're observing an ecological interaction, which is embedded in an ecological network. So networks are nothing else than a way to simplify a complex system composed by a set of elements or species, and that enables us to study the flow of energy in ecosystems. From this data, we can start comprehend patterns and establish relationships among the various pieces of information, the various species in a landscape. However, as you can imagine, this type of data requires a significant time and money investment. And for example, sometimes it's really hard to collect this type of data. What would happen to pollinator populations after the removal of a particular plant species, here in X, for example, in our screen? And this is hard to explore because we can, for example, we can remove invasive plant species for the benefit of native plants, a process we call restoration. If we want to understand, for example, how the removal of a particular plant species will affect pollinators that depend on that plant, we have to rely on theory and data science to help us. So one way to model the future trajectories of populations is using a mathematical description of the basic elements that underlie these interactions dynamics, the interactions between plants and pollinators. This relatively simple model enables us to explore how the abundance or the number of individuals in a species is affected by the interaction between plants and pollinators. So here the first term represents changes in abundances, which is what we're interested in. And it's modeled by the intrinsic growth rates of the animals and plants involved in the interaction, the competition, and also the benefit of the mutualistic interaction. And my collaborator, Jordi Bascomte, and I were interested in exploring how pollinator populations would respond to the removal of invasive plant species. So here in the figure, the y-axis is the persistence of pollinator populations, and in the x-axis, we show the communities in which the invasive plant species are absent with the X or present in the both early and late seasons of the flowering plants. And what we found is that for this particular case, the model suggests that the presence of invasive plant species might have a positive effect for pollinators in the late season, when resources may be scarce, since most plants are no longer in flowering. Thus, it's important to account for these hidden effects resulting from the removal of invasive plant species when we're doing restoration. Our study strengthens the importance of considering all aspects of species interactions when taking management decisions. And given that the invasive plant species removed may have represented an important resource for pollinators, so it might be necessary to supplement pollinator populations with additional resources following the removal of invasive plant species. And this result illustrates the power of empirical data coupled with data science and underlies the importance of maintaining diverse plant communities to support the long-term pollinator populations and the services they provide, such as pollination. So after understanding what pollinators need, we can boost their environment, aiming to restore and maintain pollinator populations. For example, this is a quintessential picture of an intensive managed agricultural landscape. This could be anywhere in the world, so not much here for pollinators to interact with. But through restoration practice, by installing native plants, we can transform this landscape into a much more sustainable landscape for pollinators. And a study like this provides a fantastic opportunity to investigate how interactions will establish themselves after disturbances. For example, once a plant starts flowering, some pollinators will be attracted and the interaction network starts to assemble. More plants flower and attract even more pollinators as time passes, and collecting data across this temporal gradient enables us to explore the patterns and mechanisms behind the temporal turnover of species. So using a 10-year data set on plant bee interactions from California, Lauren Ponizio, Claire Kremen, and I were able to explore not only how networks' patterns are changing through time, but also investigate changes at the species level. Here I invite you to please pay attention to the species highlighted in dark green, which is one of the most common species in our study system. And it's possible to see not only the differences in interactions from year to year, from year 1 to 3, but also how their position in the network is changing. This interaction flexibility, what we call interaction flexibility, is a potential mechanism that may enable communities to maintain function in the face of biodiversity threats. So today I gave you a couple of examples that I hope showed you how data science is integral to ecology and the pursuit of sustainability in the context of pollination. It's a super cool field, it's fascinating, and right now it's a very exciting and important time to be working with ecological networks. And there are lots of outstanding questions that we really don't know the answers to. For example, when you talk about bees, honeybees are usually the first thing that comes to people's mind. However, this is only one species out of the more than 20,000 bee species, and the majority of them are solitary, meaning that there is no division in labor. Solitary bees do everything on their own. They produce offspring, forage for resources, and also build and maintain the nest. So uncovering the ecology of these fascinating solitary bees is one open area of research. An exciting new avenue that I'm starting to work with is using high-resolution, low-cost, and scalable data collection. This is at the forefront of technological advancements, and I think will be a game changer, really bringing ecology into the realm of big data. And finally, high-quality data provides the necessary foundation for sustainable practices. And we need to ensure that, coupled with traditional knowledges, the information we produce can fuel evidence-based insight and can inform policy, management, and conservation decisions. So by untangling nature's web, data science can help us trace a path towards a more sustainable future.